Tell us what you discovered through that channeling, because all of a sudden there's some patience of yours after he gave you this special stone that started speaking some kind of languages that first was incomprehensible, and then it started making sense and a real message came to you.
What happened was, as these healings were coming about, word started spreading, and people started bringing me gifts. Now, gifts to them it had to do with this work, which meant people either brought me statues, little statues or big statues, every form of Mary, every Buddha, every Jesus, every this one, that one, and the other one. I mean, my office was starting to look like a store. Or they brought me crystals. Now, crystals come in one of two forms: pocket size or Volkswagen. You know, the ones that are so huge, where do you want it? Because once you put it down, there it is. So there were these giant things, and then there was the pocket size. And when someone gives you a pocket-sized crystal, they expect you to have it in your pocket. So I had this quartz and that crystal and this one and that one, and my pockets were so full that every time I bent over, some of them would fall out. And then, of course, the rose quartz always had to be shaped like a ball or an egg. So when it would fall out, it would roll down the hall, and you'd have to go chase after it. It was very exciting. You would hear them moving as I would move. And then, right after the blisters and the bleeding and everything we talked about earlier, that happened December of that first year. The healings began in August.
Yeah.
That happened December. And in January, one of my patients came in with a gift. Now, I knew what the gifts were. They were either books, statues, or crystals. So it was in a box this big. That knocked out, most likely, statues and books. I knew it was a crystal. I opened it up. He was just beaming with pride. It was this little kind of mottled, murky, dark, blackish, brownish
Not really pretty
thing.
stone.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it and trying to keep a smile on my face, you know. And, oh, what is it? He said, it's moldavite. I'm thinking, moldavite, what a lovely name, mold.
Oh, yeah.
Who wants to name something moldavite? Why don't they have fungusivites to go with it? I mean, I'm thinking, ugh. I said, what's it for? He said, oh, it's very complicated. Very complicated. You should go to, at that time, there's a bookstore that's about to close this year, very famous internationally in West Hollywood area, I believe, called the Bodhi Tree Bookstore. He said, go to the Bodhi Tree Bookstore. You can find charts and books and things on it. I said, all right. I put it in my pocket. But you see, somewhere within, I don't know, 1 to 3 days, I didn't think to make a note of this because I didn't connect the two at that moment. One of my patients, who had been a good patient of mine for about 1.5 years, he had been not in my practice for about the last 6 months. So he was a patient for about 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went away, I don't know where or what. A couple months after that, the healing started. And then he returns, expecting the same chiropractor he was going to before. So I adjusted him as I always did. I said, now close your eyes and lie down and relax. And while his eyes were closed, because my hands now had been feeling all sorts of sensations with all these people, I let my hands just sort of feel sensations. And as I did that, what I saw was this. His head jerked back, his eyes rolled to the top of his head, his mouth opened, his tongue started to move in a fashion that was clearly forming vowels, and air began to audibly escape through his mouth, looking and sounding something like this. Now, this was not confidence-inspiring. So as I moved my hands around, I noticed that when I feel a sensation, I move to an area where it gets stronger. That air sound coming out of him would get stronger. Where it moved to an area where I felt less, the air sound would get less. And I found that I could actually find the spots through feeling that would have that sound coming out of him get stronger. And I could tell he was speaking. You could see from the way his tongue was moving, it was clearly forming vowels. You knew that he was speaking, but I couldn't understand words, I actually brought my ear down closer to listen. And when I did that, I did hear something. It wasn't his voice, however. It was, I used to say this was the voice of our mothers that we all carry within us. I've changed my mind. This is the voice of my mother that we all carry within us, saying, "What are you doing? Get your ear away from that crazy person before he bites it." So now I'm trying not to be struck funny at the same time that I'm freaked out, which is a very odd
And you have your patients
balance.
outside.
Waiting in the other rooms while I'm doing this, and I suddenly figure, well, they are waiting. I guess I'd better stop. So I touched him lightly, and I said, "Fred, I think we're finished." And he opened his eyes. He looked at me. I looked at him. He didn't say anything, so I didn't say anything. I mean, what am I going to say? "Hey, what's this?" So he left. Well, I thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
At the end of the week, he came back in. I knew it was going to happen again. I took all the other patients ahead of him.
Yeah.
Then I gave him the fastest adjustment anyone ever had in their life. I said, "Close your eyes and relax." I brought my hands in, and I began to play and pull the sensations. The eyes rolled back, the mouth opened, the tongue moved, air came out again. But this time the air sort of condensed itself into a voice.
What role were you playing right there? What role were you playing? Were you consciously trying to bring a sound out and playing with the energy so it comes out?
I somehow knew. Well, I knew from the first time that when I get to the spot where I feel it the strongest, the air sound got loudest. And so as I would pull and stretch with it, like as if something was attached to my palm, and let it stretch outward, it got stronger, and I could see there were tiny little involuntary muscles moving all around on him, and I got it to a strong point, and that air sound then sort of condensed itself first into like a high-pitched sound that became deeper. So it was like, "Here we are here," and then it became a voice that said, "We are here to tell you to continue doing what you were doing. What you are doing is bringing light and information onto the planet." Then he said a few other things, and I knew my patients were waiting. Now, I'd spent all this time again with this guy. I had to stop. I didn't want to. I didn't want to say, "Gee, Mr. Great and Wonderful Voice that it's come all the way through the universe now. It's never happened before. Now's not a great time. Can you come back? 7:30 would be good." You know, I didn't know what to do, so I finally touched him lightly, and this time he jumped up off the table against the wall where I had the wall telephone, blocking it with his arms because he thought I was going to have him carted off to a mental hospital.
Yeah.
And he explained that he had had this voice come through him since he was young, but only 2 people in his life knew about it. He didn't want anyone to know about it. He felt something was happening on his last visit with me, but he thought I didn't notice anything. You know? And this time it sort of got away from him. So I thought, all right, this is something that he does. But 3 days later, 2 days later, it happened to 3 other patients. Their eyes rolled, their mouth opened, tongue moved, air came out. And on their second visit, they had a similar experience, and the air condensed itself into words. And they said the same words that Fred had said, the first 2 phrases: "We are here to tell you to continue doing what you are doing. What you are doing is bringing light and information onto the planet." And 2 of them added, "What you're doing is reconnecting strands." One of them said, "What you're doing is reconnecting strings." Fred came back in at the end of that week and added, "What you're doing is reconnecting strings." None of these 4 people knew each other. I mean, yeah, Fred and the other 3, right? And then a few days later, after the weekend, it happened to a few more people, and then a few more. And for a 3-month period of time, starting right there in the return, you know, a little bit after the beginning of the year in January, February, March, April, middle of April, about 3 months, over 50 different people lost consciousness, 50, lost consciousness, and you could channeled in 6 verbatim phrases. Now you could call it channeling, you could call it speaking in tongues, except the people who call it speaking in tongues.
What was it? What was coming through? What was communicating? Who was communicating?
Now you know what it felt like to be me. What is it that's coming through? Who's communicating? What's communicating? What does it mean? It's like, oh my God, all I have are these questions. I don't know. I don't know.
How were you reacting to this? Weren't you totally, freaked out and thought you were mad for hearing those voices from those people? And how did you react?
I was at times a little startled because, you know, sometimes you listen to, there's a phrase that, as far as I'm concerned, is a mistranslation, or if it's an accurate translation, then it's a misinterpretation. That's used quite commonly in the Bible. Usually Christianity brings this phrase up a lot. You don't hear it a whole lot in Judaism, or probably in Islam, I don't know. But they speak about God-fearing. And I'm thinking, what kind of God would want you to be in fear?
Mm-hmm.
When I experienced this, it was so huge. What I experienced was awe, like, I understand how pure awe can be mistaken or misinterpreted for fear. But if we observe the awe instead of judging the awe, then it's not fear. It's this intense amount of wonder that may well not have been experienced before, so we don't know what to do with it. So human nature, led by ego and judgment, judges that state and goes, ooh, it might be something not good, so we resist it, and the resistance becomes a pain or an actual fear. The more we resist, the more we feel the fear, the more we feel the fear, and the more we feel the pain of the fear, the more we resist. But remove the judgment and rise to a level of allowing yourself to simply be the observer and the observed, the witness and the witnessed, the seer and the seen. Then we get to experience that not knowing without fear. Our experiences themselves, you know, we think of good experiences and bad experiences. The experiences themselves are really neutral. We give it the charge by the filter through which we view it.
Right.
So it was this state of awe, and it wasn't fear, but I could see how some could interpret it that way. It was something that I'd never seen before. The patients in my office, when they saw other people do it, were shocked. And for the first 6 months of that 6 weeks of that 3-month period, my patients who spoke in these voices had lost consciousness when the voice had come through. They didn't even know it. When they came to, the patients from my reception room and the other rooms had come in to see what was going on as they heard the voice come out. And they opened their eyes, and all these people were standing around them and saying, what's going on? And so we explained it. And I remember some of them would respond, you mean I said this, so you said this to me, and then I said that to you, and everyone's going, uh-huh, and they're going, no, it didn't happen. But it did. But it did. So, yeah.
What triggered that? I mean, what allowed this communication to take place? This
Is that a sneaky way of saying, so get back to the Moldavite?
Was it the Moldavite that created that?
Well, not exactly, but the Moldavite may have been the vibrational reminder or recognition part of the many gifts that had come from this. Because the person said to me, you can read about it, you know, in the Bodhi Tree bookstore, for instance, or any other spiritual metaphysical bookstore. I put it in my pocket. I forgot about it. Somewhere that day or within the next few days, all this began. It was months later that I found myself in the Bodhi Tree bookstore, and I had that stone, and I decided to look at Moldavite. And everything I read on it spoke about bringing in communications from guides, spirits, entities, simply an opening up of a multidimensional communication. That seems to have been the experience I was on. I mean, look, the whole thing was so seemingly surreal that when I was a kid, when I was really young, I remember one time I'd had, like, you know, any child might, a bad dream. So I went in and I told my mother about it because I said, you know, I knew I was dreaming and I didn't know how to get out of it, and it was a bad dream and I wanted to get out of it. And she said to me, next time you know that you're in a dream, you're having a dream, if it's a bad dream, and you want to get out of it, blink your eyes 3 times, and on the 3rd time, hold your eyes wide open and you'll wake up. And you know, I did that. So, you know, for anyone with a small child who has bad dreams, tell them that it really did work. The funny thing was, one day, after all these things occurred, and at the point where I was in the middle of the time where these people were channeling words, you know, somewhere in the middle of that 3-month period, I thought to myself, this cannot possibly be real. Maybe it's a dream. I remember thinking this. I was on my way, leaving my home to go to the office. And I was like, what's going to happen today? What's going to happen today? And I was locking the door. And the way the street is set up and my house, there's like the doors here and there's a little wall here before the stairs lead down. So no one can see you when you're close and they're locking the door. And I realized no one could see me. And I closed my eyes. I blinked my eyes 3 times hard and I held them open really wide to see if I would wake up. To see if that 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, if it were really just a dream, maybe I was in a coma somewhere, I'd wake up in a hospital bed. It just seemed like it was all that time. I didn't wake up. So if it's a dream, well, welcome to it, because you're now in it with me.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
So it's literally a quantum leap. You started to trusting this force all of a sudden. You started to shift that fear from really trusting it and working with it and waking up to this reality.
I knew it. I knew it. I absolutely knew it.
Or were you all the time between those 2 worlds? What kind of person are you? Are you a person that, you say in your book, I love that, like there's a few types of people. There is either the people that have seen it,
people who believe in nothing beyond the basic 5 senses, people who are open to the possibility of something beyond it, or people who believe in something. No, I fell right then into a 4th group. I experienced it. It went way beyond faith, hope, or belief. It was simply, there it was. There it was. At some point later on, I carried that Moldavite in my pocket. In Utah with a friend, and we were in a rush to get out of the hotel room, and she was one of these people who everything had to be folded and put into place in just the right way, and she was fast, and she moved and folded everything up. We left, we went to our appointment, we're sitting somewhere, and suddenly I reached in my pocket, it's not there. I realized it had fallen out of the pants. I leave, I rushed back to the hotel room, I looked through everything. Trash cans, nope. Floor, nope. Gone. Housekeeping had come in, they'd vacuumed. I went and I made them give me that vacuum cleaner bag, and I looked through it. And then I checked the other vacuum cleaners. I checked where they threw it out, all the way down to where it would go in the final incinerator or trash bin that was sealed and you couldn't get into. It was gone. But you know what? This continued. And the gift of that, much as I would love to have that original piece for history's sake, the gift of that was recognizing that we do not need anything external. What that piece of Moldavite may well have done is allowed me to interact with or become aware of a certain vibration or frequency But the gift comes only when we transcend the technique, when we transcend the ritual, when we bless it, love it, give it away. Only when we remove the training wheels can we rise to this new level. I believe it's certainly wonderful to interact with Moldavite. I've received gifts of Moldavite. I have some at home, but I have not, by recognizing our own ability to be 100% everything that is needed and required, we then no longer have to vest ourselves in these healing toys, objects, and fear-based rituals. We can see the gift that everything plays in the universe, and yet not be dependent upon it. Furthermore, recognize that nothing can make us more if we allow ourselves to be 100%. Something can only make us more if we're less than 100%.
You're one of the teachers that says that. A lot of teachers want to keep their secret.
And sell their jewelry and other equipment that they create that supposedly makes you more. The music to bring in special healing frequencies, the fear-based necklace that you put on in the morning that's supposed to protect you from electromagnetic frequencies or entities in the subway. And what happens? Every time we do something fear-based, it brings about more fear. We put on our little fear-based necklace in the morning, and we get ourselves ready to go out into the day of things to be protected from. Every time we wash our hands or pass a mirror, we straighten out our little fear-based piece of jewelry to remind us that there's something to be afraid of. At night, before we go to bed, we take off our little fear-based jewelry, we place it on the nightstand behind us so we can keep our fear safe all night. There's an oxymoron for you. So we can wake up the next day, put it back on, and start the next day in the consciousness of fear, because we consider ourselves spiritual and healers, when the truth is, as long as we stand there in fear, lack, limitation, separation, and the illusion of lack of light, which we like to label as darkness, we cannot facilitate healing, because healing resides over here in love, oneness, unity, prosperity, abundance, light. We cannot give that which we are unwilling to receive. We cannot stand here in a state of fear and facilitate healing that exists over here in love. At some point, we have to challenge ourselves to gather up our fears and our insecurities, risk whatever we're afraid might happen, and carry them over here where the light is. And suddenly, when we're standing in the light, we find that there's never been darkness in the first place. It's only been those areas where we haven't let the light in to begin with. Darkness doesn't exist. If it did, we could sweep it up, put it into a paper bag, and stick it out with the trash. Darkness is really only that place where we have not yet allowed ourselves to be light. The roles of many of the healing technique teachers today, remember, everything is neutral. We give it the charge. Aren't good or bad, but are functional. Because by continuously telling us, breathe into 4 and blow out to 8, move your hands clockwise, careful, don't move them counterclockwise, bring in this color for this and this color for that, not that color because that could cause a problem, but this one, hold one hand here and one hand here and collapse the wavelength as if we know. We know there's no technique but collapse the wavelength, then it's a technique. The role of them is to probably bring us to a point where we're saying, I am simply not going to live here in fear, lack, and limitation any longer. Here's the little wooden carved necklace you gave me. It's very pretty. It's $200, but take it back because I'm reclaiming myself and I'm walking over here to stand in the light. And that is a challenge for a lot of us. But it's the most beautiful, ecstatic state of being once we enter into it.
Like transforms a lot of things.
Transforms everything.
So there's no, for you, there's no karma or dark souls or things to remove from this light.
Those are the, shall we say, spiritual personifications of our fears. Of course, they appear real. We find different ways to validate them. We can say, oh yes, I felt a fear and there was negative energy here, and to make sure I checked it on my Rife machine and I muscle tested and I used my pendulum. Of course all these things will confirm that because you're in a state of fear. And the universe always says yes. And you go, no, but I know that it was real. Of course you have to think it was real. Fear means, in English, F-E-A-R is false evidence that appears real. It has to be appearing real to be fear, otherwise it's just fur. It's just false evidence that's real. It has to appear real because that's our challenge in walking through it. When this first appeared, I said I was in awe. I was in awe without fear. The fear is human-made, human-produced. Mm-hmm. I remember my first introduction to fear was as I allowed myself to interact with the spiritual community. And when the first people started to witness or hear about these voices coming through, I remember someone said to me, "What's the source of that voice?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know." They said, is it good? Is it bad? I said, well, it's good. It's God. It's love. It's the universe. They said, how do you know? How do you know it's good? I said, I don't know. How am I supposed to find out? Because here's one of these important spiritual people giving me a question. I figured they could give me how to find the answer. Mm-hmm. I said, how do you know? They said, ask it. Well, even I knew that was the most ridiculous response anyone could have given me. It's like if you watch The Wizard of Oz and there's a good witch and a bad witch. If you ask the good witch if she's a good witch, she tells you the truth and says, yes, I'm a good witch. If you ask the bad witch if she's a good witch or a bad witch, she'll lie and say she's a good witch. I mean, ask it. What kind of answer is that? So suddenly I realize I'm left with my first introduction of many into fear that is carried in the metaphysical, spiritual, New Age communities. And the person didn't even have the courtesy to give me a roadmap how to find an answer to climb out of it. So I'm thinking, how do I find out? How do I find out? Never dawned on me to even think about it. And I finally came up with two possible worst case scenarios, the two worst case possibilities. Worst case scenario A, I die, I go to heaven, I show up at the pearly gates or whatever is there, and St. Peter or whoever is there is flipping through the book of whatever, and looks at my name and goes, Eric Pearl, You led a lot of people down a foolish path. You have to go back and live your life over 600 times. Well, I didn't like that a lot. But here's the other worst case possibility. I show up, whoever's there flips through the book and says, we gave you an opportunity to bring about a change in consciousness and evolution. That, although there are no guarantees in life, could reverberate throughout the universe for all time. And you didn't do it because you were afraid. Mm-hmm. And you see, that was the answer I couldn't live with. We have to, at some point, if we truly want to grow, if we truly want to become the best that any of us can be, we have to step through our fears as they present themselves. I'm not speaking of doing this foolishly. If you're afraid to jump off of a 150-story building, don't do that. There's no wisdom in it. But if, for an example that I use is, if you're going to a healing seminar, and you're on your way there, and you look down and you go, oh my God, I'm wearing too much black. Don't run upstairs and put on your healing colors. Go upstairs and put on all black, and don't cheat. Don't put on purple underwear. The worst thing that could happen is you'll die. And if you do, you'll be all right anyhow. If not, you'll just step through one unconscious fear. And each time we allow ourselves to step through one unconscious fear, 1,001 other fears fall away with it. Because, as we talked about, darkness doesn't exist. we allow ourselves to vibrate at the level of light, these densities in our life, if it's appropriate for us, fall away. And healing is just that simple. And anything, any object, any ritual, any protection, anything more complicated than that is designed to sell us something.
Would you say you're like a magician that is, though, revealing its secrets? Would you think you're a magician?
No.
Are you David Copperfield?
A magician in today's language.
No, like a magician,
means, yeah, but magician, in at least in present-day terminology, is an illusionist. If there's one thing this is not, it's illusion. Or
but
if it is illusion,
if it is,
if it is illusion, it's my illusion as well. But you mean magic is the way a child sees it when it's real and it's pure?
Like the magic of life.
See, now you're asking multiple questions. Because no, as being a magician, even as a child would see it, or in a fairy tale, because, I mean, because whether your magic is as a fairy god, mother or father, or this or that and the other, even in a fairy tale, you become one special person that's separate from everyone else. If anything, I am what everyone is, a light and a teacher. It's just that this is the particular course that the universe and I have agreed for me to light up, that we can all equally become this.
Yeah.
In our seminars, what I tell everyone is that it's, you know, it's 2-day seminar, 2.5 days, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, usually. By that Sunday, I'm pretty much able to guarantee everyone, I'd say 2 things. A, that they'll be able to do anything and everything that I can do in the way of healing. And B, that you'll be able to facilitate anything that any human being on this planet can facilitate in the way of healings, whether they work out of a church deep in Brazil and change their last name to be of God, or whether they were raised by a monk in a cave in a mountaintop in Tibet and fed grains of seed, each one flowing into the beak of individual birds. I mean, it doesn't matter the story we create. We're talking about a girl lost in the woods in Russia who finds special wood. It doesn't matter what story we create. When we are willing to let go of the costume, the performance, the story, it's only then that we come back home. We access what's within. And once we do that, we all rise to that level of 100%.
I see you as a magician that reveals a secret, but as a magician of life that is together with this frequency, with this vibration, with this energy of the whole, and that creates wonders and on this planet, like something that our minds cannot understand, but that is a gift, that is true magic to its sense, without any illusions or without any.
But I just share this.
Yeah.
Once you learn how to